Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. At the Animal Alliance, we're working towards a future where no pet is euthanized due to overpopulation. Our strategy is simple: spay and neuter. Visit theanimalalliance.org to learn how you can support this cause. Your help can save lives and make a significant impact. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show. And today we have a guest from across the pond, which is always exciting. I love hearing other people, although I will say his accent is not as strong, which is kind of amazing, actually. Maybe that's because he grew up in multiple different places. But his name is, and I'm going to try and do my best here, Ali Poryet. And he has been... he's from a lot of different places, so I'm excited to hear his story of how he ended up where he is today. But he believes, and he's trying to promote, a world that is better than the one that he's in right now, right? And that's one of the reasons I'm here is how do we help our world get better? I believe that one of the tenets of a better world is going to be asking questions that are better questions to answer, and then actually doing something about those answers. Like, what's leading you to take an action? What questions are you asking yourself that inspire you to act differently? And so that's why we do the podcast. That's why I'm inviting him on to have that perspective. And I'm excited to ask him questions about the way he grew up and how he sees the world and see where we align. So go ahead, Ali, talk to us about your childhood, where you grew up, how you grew up, what led you down the path of kind of constructing your mind and your beliefs the way they are today, and then what are you doing now?
Hello, everybody, and thank you, Sam, for putting this together. Let's start with childhood. I was born in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, and when I was born there, it wasn't the opulent city it is today. It was really just starting out, and it was more desert than anything else. Schooling happened Dubai and Switzerland, boarding school. And then fast forward to university, I moved to Canada, to Toronto, and I did my education there mostly. So I first did the economics bachelor's degree, then I did a philosophy bachelor's degree, then I did an MBA, then I did a master's in philosophy, then a master's in political science, and then postgraduate studies in conflict resolution and international relations. And that was where it stopped. I got into the finance world. One thing led to another, had my own fund, grew up really successfully into the, over $100 million net worth. And one day I quit. I gave all the money away, gave everything up, restructured myself, and essentially thought I need to live with purpose, and a purpose that is more than just making money or piling money. And so it took me 5 years to think about, and that was in 2016. And it took me about give or take 5 years until 2020, until the beginning of the pandemic almost, to come up with Compassivist. And I did a lot of soul searching. I did a lot of, trying different things for myself. And I realized two things during that period from when I stopped working 2016 to now. The first was I realized I have an addiction, and the addiction was to money. It wasn't to a drug, it wasn't to alcohol, it wasn't to gambling, but it was to the accumulation of money. And I saw in myself that all of the routes I was taking to make any change in the world after I'd quit working and after I'd said I want to purpose my life to something more valuable, I realized I'm trying to do it with money. I'm trying to continuously force money into the equation. And I thought I need to change that. I need to let that go. Because if I don't let that go, it will always dominate me. It'll always be a matter of finding the capitalist angle in everything that I'm trying to do. And so that's when I realized I've had friends that I've actually helped myself get into rehab programs and support them and help them make that transition to a clean life. And I've seen them go through detox in such a difficult period in the beginning of rehabilitation. And then, the social rehabilitation, the clinical rehabilitation, coming back into the world, reactivating, finding purpose, finding life, finding new friends, all of that. And I put myself through that same grind. I gave away all the money. That was the detox period of me kind of being in shock about what I did and, breaking down completely. And then learning about compassion from there, from the moment where I had nothing. And I saw how people, and I was traveling at the time, and I was traveling through a lot of developing countries, through a lot of very poor countries that I had been to before as well. And I'd only seen that part of the country that caters to wealthy tourists. And now I'm seeing the rest of the world, essentially. And I realized compassion is the root of all possibility to change. You have to feel, you have to want to, you have to put yourself in other people's shoes, other animals, places, and find a way that you can progress without damage, without deterioration, without, to advance yourself, that you should implicate the development of other people. And so I thought the best way to do this for myself is through expression first, to take that compassion and express it. And I learned that's the arts, essentially. I mean, most social revolutions or movements that have occurred in the world for the better have started out from the arts, and most innovations as well. I mean, you think back to ideas that were painted or were thought out or were spoken that only came into manifestation decades or centuries later. And so I thought, this is great. We have to have compassion. We have to have a purpose to do something with our lives. And we have to express that purpose through a medium of communication. And then we have to act on it. Just like you say in your intro. I mean, the whole aspect of this is, how do you act on it? Because today you go on social media, which didn't exist 30 years ago, but today it does. And you go on social media and you see every person is just an amazing person on social media. They're all saying all these lovely things, and they're all loving, and they're all compassionate, and everybody wants to help, and everybody wants a better world. But then you put your phone away and you look outside and you don't see that reflection of what you see on social media. Everybody's happy, everything's beautiful. And you see a darker world, and you think, what happened here is there was a break, a split from the rhetoric and the narrative of compassion to the idea of acting it out. And so Compassivist came to birth, which essentially is the words compassion and activist put together. And here, by activism, I mean exactly the taking of the action. So I'll give an example with books. A lot of people buy books, read books, and when we go into the bookstore and we pick up a print book, do we ask ourselves, where did this paper come from? How was it sourced? Who bound the book? Was it in some slave labor camp in Bangladesh or another country with lax labor laws? Or is it bound in a country like the United States or the UK or some other place that is well monitored? Do we know that? Do we not know that? What is the footprint of this book in terms of its environmental and ecological footprint? And then buy the book. And if we ask ourselves all those questions with a compassionate mind, we may possibly not make all the purchases that we do, because we need more education, more answers to these. and we try to find alternatives to these kind of paths. So Compassivist is essentially internal in the sense that you need to ask all of these questions, all of these compassion-based questions before you make any active decisions. And it's a social movement in the sense that once you've understood these, and once you've said, hey, I have issues with all of these choices that I have and all of these actions that I can take, you seek like-minded people to come together and essentially form communities to make the better choices. So in the example of the book, you form communities in which you can talk about how to share digital forms of the books, or how to share the books that you have already, so that you're not contributing to more purchases of print and more deterioration and more money towards slave labor, towards environmental deterioration, towards all the logistics that goes into this program, for example, and many other things. And that's, in a nutshell, the difference that we can have as people, as communities united, as the consumer. Because at the end of the day, as much as people like to blame the corporations or the governments or all these other arms, the blame falls on our shoulders for, one, our ignorance, the lack of education, and two, the lack of action. Because we vote, we have the dollars as consumers, we are the people working in those corporations, and it comes down to us to be able to make those changes. And that's what it's all about.
Awesome. Well, I have a lot of questions here. And we probably won't get through all of them, but I'm just curious as a general. One of the things that I like about having people on the show is sometimes I get to have people on the show that at least at the beginning of the show, I don't know that I agree fully with the premise and outcome of the premise. Not fully, right? I think that I have, as a human, we have similar lived experiences and we agree to a degree. But then like our decisions about how to act as a result of those questions could vary. Right. Mm. And I honestly thought that we might disagree more than what I just heard you say. So that's good. I mean, on the one hand, that's good. I am still curious though, because one of the things that I see it happening in the UK from what we're shown, and I don't know, I'm fully on the side of what we see in the media it could easily be 80% propaganda versus reality. Easily, maybe more, but at least that, right? I have spent time living in Scotland and Ireland, so I have some experience, at least back in 2012, which I know is before a lot of things happened, but so I still have some experience of being around the people. I lived there for 2 years, so starting to understand, ask questions, their perspectives, their mindsets, what was being molded, and all that was pre-COVID. So there was a lot of things that changed in society since then. I understand that, but there are some just very different opinions about what I would consider the maybe the role of outside forces in society versus the self, and what is the self's responsibility versus the not. So from my perspective, in general in America, and I'm going to go back to 2012 in this contrast, because I think in America even we've really over the last 7 or so years really advanced a lot more towards the government being involved in our lives more than they were even 12 years ago. And I see that as a negative movement towards autonomy and towards society rather than a positive movement personally. But back in 2012, the European consciousness, it seemed, was very much more, hey, everybody should be in this helping each other. And so high tax situation, government be the one who determines what happens. But from my perspective, that led to poorer service or in certain areas of the marketplace, and not just poorer service, but then also a lot more things were allowed in society, then I would want to be in my society that I live in, right? From a criminal perspective, from a drug perspective, I mean, just a lot of things that were more allowed there than in America. And we have things in America where you have guns and you have like certain other things that they were like, oh my gosh, how can everybody have a gun? Well, how can everybody be doled out heroin if you want to? Like, I don't like what's worse. I don't know that you go to your med spot and you get your cup of heroin every morning, or that everybody here has a gun and we don't have as much heroin. I don't know. Like these are real social issues and I don't know the answer to them. That's why one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show is like, I now can see even more so that your mindset is really coming from my don't let me put too many words in your mouth, but from a spiritual, compassionist change perspective, not a mandate perspective, but from an internal consciousness perspective.
100%.
And I'm grateful for that. So now I'm even more excited to have this conversation because these are real things. You're experiencing it in Europe. Europe is, its own deal. There's a lot of immigration that's causing friction because now you have people from other cultures, and I'm not slamming any culture, but I do think that when you bring other cultures into different cultures and you try and mix them, and there's not clear boundaries of, hey, we're now stepping into a new culture and we need to assimilate to that culture, it causes greater conflict rather than clarity. And I don't know whose job it is to police that. And I'm using the police in a charitable perspective, not like a mandate perspective. But I do think that causes a lot of chaos, and it's happening in America right now. So how do we both live consciously, but also have clear guidelines of, hey, this is our culture, and don't come in and bastardize our culture because you just have different perspectives than us. Go live where you were. If you liked your perspective over there, go live over there. If you don't, stay the heck out of our place that we're living in our own happy world. So anyways, I'm just curious. I know that seems like it's not really a question. I'm just curious to understand where your mindset's at on that. Like, what is to be done with some of these bigger world issues that we are facing, and how do we actually behave in a compassionate way, but still have rules of society that we can all agree on and operate with?
Okay. We'll do this together so that we cross, the bridges that we need to together. Let's start at when you say these greater societal issues on a global scale. We should agree, for example, that the environmental issues that we're facing today are causing a lot of damage, a lot of destruction, in the sense that, you have your wildfires, you have your floods, you have all those things. Now, on both sides of the equation, people who believe climate change is solely the cause of our overconsumption and, the massive production and all of that, to the other side of the thought process that this is just a cyclical event that happens, regardless of which side we're on. The point is, right now we have this cycle going on, whether you call it a natural event or whether you call it something that we brought on to address all kinds of listeners. This is happening right now. So in agreement, in a sense, we say, we want to resolve this. We want to make this better. How can we make this better so we can live happier in societies? Now, a lot of the migration in Europe is actually happening because of this, because the natural disasters that happen in Africa, for example, are causing a lot more famine, a lot more poverty, a lot more problems. So to find life, people are, crossing the Mediterranean at any cost, at the cost of life. They're crossing the Mediterranean. They're landing in Italy and Greece and Spain, and they're trying to make their way up north. And so you say, okay, a lot of people say, we can't afford this economically. We can't afford this socially. We can't afford this on a cultural level, because a lot of these people are coming into our cultures. And as you say, they are causing change in our cultures or rifts in the culture. And so it's affecting people in many ways. Now, is there a solution? Well, the solution to not migrate comes at a point where wealthier nations would have to step in and support the infrastructure of the poorer nations so that these poorer nations can hold their own capacity of population and society instead of spending the money in immigration systems. So even in the United States, you have a lot of people coming from Latin America up, and you have camps set up at the border in the southern states. And the states that, the situation with in the states that border Mexico is far different than the situation of the states that border Canada. And in this sense, you're spending a lot of money putting up the wall during Trump's era, and policing and monitoring and having a lot of different ways to monitor this migration. And it's a big drain on the taxation system because a lot of the money is going into these kind of operations. Whereas, what if there was a pact where we could help these countries that people are flooding out of because of a lot of different problems and poverty and issues and conflicts, like in Haiti right now, to subdue these so that people can stay put in their places, in their countries, in their own safe houses, right? And the people who want to migrate can migrate so freely with the will that what they are going to find where they're going to in the US, for example, they want to be in Silicon Valley because they're really into the tech business and they have some innovative ideas and they feel like that's the place they want to be. Great. You apply, you have an opportunity, you get approved through the legal measures, and you go there and you operate and you grow. And that's what that's for. I mean, you don't go to Silicon Valley to become, to practice the art of your carpentry, because it's not the hub of that thing. So people go there for a purpose. To allow that purpose is great. It grows society. I don't think there's a culture clash there because people integrate into the societies that they move into where they feel aligned. I think the culture clashes happen when people move into societies out of desperation of moving there, not by will. So if I lived 5 minutes from the border of Texas, and my city got run over by drugs and cartels and things like that, and I wanted to get out and I wanted to have, take my family and find a secure place to live, I will try to sneak into the other side of the border in Texas, not willingly, not because I know this is where my culture is and this is where I would find my happy space, but because this is the only place I can go to find security and safety.
Join the Animal Alliance in our mission to end the needless euthanasia of cats and dogs. Our spay and neuter programs are saving lives every day, but we need your help. Visit theanimalalliance.org to donate, volunteer, or learn more. Together, we can create a brighter future for our furry friends.
So if I do make it safely over the border with my family, and I try to now reside there as an illegal immigrant, I face a whole lot of problems, from getting a job, from maintaining my family, sending the kids to school. So many things happen that are incredible. You think you've made it into the country, now you're fine. No, you're not. You have a whole new host of problems. So what happens there? Then I'm going to start looking for my own people, so to speak, my culture. I'm going to find some other people who are in the same situation and navigate the boat just like they did. I'm not going to come to Sam, who was born in the US and is living there and is part of that culture, and say, Sam, what do I do? Because generally Sam won't know, right? The average American won't know. So they'll go and find somebody who has been through this. So then that culture tightens up a little. They got to help each other. They got to support each other. They got to grow this community that they have and the struggles. And so that's where you find these compartmentalizations of cultures. So very famously in the US, you go to the big cities like New York, there's Chinatown, there's Koreatown, there's all these different places, and people stay very tight in those places and they maintain their cultures. Even in Toronto, when I went to school there and I lived there for 20 years, there were Chinese people in Toronto's Chinatown who didn't speak English, and they lived in Toronto. And they were fine because their bankers spoke Chinese. Everybody they needed around them in their community spoke their language. It was as if they lived in China, but in the soil of Canada, so to speak. So right. Yes, the culture is completely different. Some people will never know what the Canada's history, for example, or anything about Canada. They're just there for the economic benefit that Canada is giving them, in that moment in their life. So how do you open that up? How do you allow that to kind of spread? It's a spiritual thing.
How much of the again, and I'm sharing this from my perspective, right? And I've only been where I've been, and so that's the extent of my knowledge. Is I do my best to stick to firsthand knowledge, but then there's also like a level of I can't be everywhere, and I have to trust somebody and something, right? At some point. So you try and learn about other countries. You ask the people who actually came from these places, what's their intentions, what's going on, and you do your best to have these conversations, just like I'm having with you. A lot of this, some of it is, we'll call it, not you used the word anyways. Basically, global warming. It's environmental. There we go. I was like, what is this word? Okay, so some of the immigration is environmental, from a Earth environment perspective, we'll call it, because I think environment can be a lot of different things. Some of it is a crime environment.
Conflict.
Conflict environment.
Like imagine Yemen or Syria, for example. That's a conflict environment. And then crime would be a lot of Southern America, like, when you talk about El Salvador, that's a crime environment. So there's a lot of compartmentalized different ways.
Exactly. Then you have for migration, where there's like political, either asylum or there's political issues. Yeah. And so when we're talking about the wealthy countries maybe doing a little bit more to help people exist where they are rather than having to migrate, a lot of that comes across as the wealthy nations, for lack of a better word. This is where military might or policing comes in, where now it almost seems empiristic, where the wealthier nations are going in saying, hey, now your government's not working. And the reason that people are leaving Venezuela, or the reason that people are leaving these places, is because your government's corrupt. We can keep sending money, but guess what happens to the money? We can keep sending money to Iran. We can keep sending money to Israel. We can keep sending money to all these different places. But if the people, if the criminals are the ones stealing all the money, then money's not a solution anymore. And resources isn't a solution. Sending food, blankets, whatever, right? Humanitarian aid, that's not a solution, because it's all being usurped, and then they're still using it as a way to control their population. So the only way at that point is to use military to go in and then control, and you could say democratize, or whatever words you want to say, try and establish some level of certainty and consistency and rules-based, whatever those rules are, whether it's an autocracy, a democracy, whether it's a dictatorship, whatever. Like, China's not maybe the best, and they have a lot of bad things, but at least they have a system that works. It maybe doesn't work for everybody, but it survives, So understanding what is the solution there, because at some point, I do think that it overruns a society and economy if we're going to not choose to be the military occupying force to make sure it runs properly. Then we have, if we aren't going to force that to make it a tenable situation, sending goods and services isn't going to help, or money isn't going to help, because that's not working. Then what other option is there other than to allow them to come? But if they come and they don't assimilate into at least the laws, right? The people in Chinatown, they still obey American laws. Right?
Yes.
They didn't set up their own set of laws and say, nah, we're like in Seattle, where, hey, no, we have a city of Chaz, right? We're just going to make some random stuff up. And then we're going to start operating off of the same laws that they're saying, no borders, but there's a border here. No, anybody's welcome except for you, right? It's like, okay, well, now you're obeying just like any other sovereign nation would, which is what we're trying to do, which is what you're protesting against, which is what you became. It's like, it's comical to a degree. But I really wonder, like, what is the solution to some of these things? And I get that it can be spiritual or compassion, but what does that look like in an environment where the actual system is corrupt, and you can kind of change it from societal perspective, but sometimes the other people have bigger guns, and that's just a reality. I feel that way in America sometimes. America has bigger guns than some of us who don't have bigger guns.
And I'll give you an example. Education. Education is one form of transition. So if you look at some of societies that have progressed to becoming developed nations, even from developing status, or to becoming wealthier nations, as you say, from poorer nations, you can see places like Finland, you can see places like Singapore, Japan, after the Americans, dropped the atomic bombs on them. I mean, this was a place that really nobody was expecting this place within a few decades to be as advanced as it became. Being Japan was not known before the bombings of World War II to be that superpower of car manufacturing and electronics and all those things. And so what happened there is, investment in education caused a generational shift in mindset. And you don't have that investment in education in all the countries and the access to that education in all the countries that you find a lot of the plights in. So if you look at a lot of the poorer nations and you look at the statistics, there is a lot of deficiency, as I call it, in terms of the education system. Now, in the United States, for example, or in Canada, it's not that there are no problems in those countries. Those countries are rife with problems. That is why the United States, for the last three elections, the elections have been basically, you call it a democracy, but when 50% of the population is against the winning president, what kind of a democracy is that? Half the country is against it. Literally, your winnings are like 49.8 versus 50.2. You're basing the democracy on the win of an extra 20,000 people. But what about the 150 million people who said, no, we don't like this system?
Sure.
So
well, I don't know where in society or what the turning point was, but America was never meant or established as a democracy. It was just established as a republic, and there's been a consistent effort to turn it into a democracy rather than a republic. And that's been it was kind of established as a mixture of the two, but it was established as a republic. So the way a republic works different than a democracy is democracy almost always devolves, deteriorates into a mobocracy. Okay. Like almost always, mobocracy, autocracy, dictatorship. Like that's kind of where democracy leads. And the founding fathers at this point, based on their writings, would have said, no, we don't want that. This is why we created a republic, where there's at one level, there's a democracy type where we're going to select our representatives based on population and based upon state. So that's the Senate and the Congress. Congress is based off population, and Senate is based off of every state gets two. So it's an even based on interest and also population. And then later on, there became an electoral college, which there's an argument for or against that, right? I'm not getting into that necessarily right now. But then the electoral college is essentially the democracy votes, and based on which state wins those votes, then those delegates theoretically are supposed to vote with the public. They have they have a moral obligation to, but no legal obligation to, which is
exactly
its own set of screwed up. And so then there's definitely conflicts inside of the system for sure. No, it's not a perfect thing, but I don't think it was ever meant to be a pure democracy. And it's been bastardized into that, to where it's been taught about socially. And this is one of the things that when I was in Europe, I recognized is that CNN is the primary news source in Sky News and whatever, but like CNN is the primary news source in other countries coming out of America, right? They have their own news stations, but CNN is okay. Well, CNN in America has very little credibility, and we all kind of see it as this, not all, but there's many people who see it as this kind of left, very, very one-sided leaning thing, just like we have other.
But you would say the one-side leaning is left, right?
I would say it's left of society, left of center, we'll say. And
is that not the ruling? Is CNN not on the side of the ruling government right now? of the presidency?
Um,
I would say Fox is not, and CNN
I would say
is.
it's more that way. Personally, I think they're all part of the same game, and they're all owned by the same people.
Yes,
they're
of course. I agree with you there 100%. And I think they just spread their investments all across from one side of the spectrum to the other.
So for me, I look at, rather than how it's manifesting in our society, I look at who follow the money. And this is where it's like, oh, education. Okay, well, who's invested most into education in America? Because I'm all for investing in education. The problem is, who's investing into education? George Soros, the Rockefellers, these people who, when you just look at how they built their wealth, where their wealth came from, stop looking at their mouth and start looking at their actions. What is their mission in society? I don't think that they have very many, if any, positive missions in society. I think their mission is to create more chaos, because the same people who are invested in education and pharmaceutical medication and oil prices and the military war machines, they're all the same funders. They're all the same people. They're all the same people, not just in America, but, and it's public news, right? We fund both sides of the war. We're funding Hamas, we're funding Israel, we're funding Iran, we're funding China, we're funding Russia, we're funding Ukraine, we're funding, there's money going everywhere, because the dollars, they only care what's going to give me a ROI. They don't care from the whole compassionist view. They don't really care about that at all. They're like,
you're doing that right now. You're doing the Compassivist method right now, because you're asking all the questions and you're saying, my mind for a better society does not allow me to contribute to that in my actions. So you're saying my dollars are going to the right place. I'm not feeding my dollars into this system. When I have a child, I'm not putting them in these schools that teach them these.
No, our kids are homeschooled.
Exactly.
I'm not participating.
Exactly. And I love that you brought this up, because you say our kids are homeschooled. And I want to say this specifically to an American audience, and that is this. Do you know that your child spends more time with their teacher than they do with you in their awake cycle? Because when they come home, they got a few hours, and then they go to bed. They're sleeping most of the time they're home. They spend time with the teacher. Do you know who the teacher is? Do you know what their values are, what their political values are, what their religious values are, what their moral values are? Hell, I'm sorry to say this, but that teacher can be advocating a future of OnlyFans. That's not for me. I'm sorry, but that's not for me. That's not for my child. I don't want my child to grow that way. I want my child to bring some kind of positive experience to the universe as they grow up. So in that perspective, I'm 100% with you. Why? Because regardless of pointing fingers on who the person is, because I'm never going to be able to reach, for example, the names that you mentioned, Rockefeller or Soros, and their capacity to invest in what affects me. But what I do have the capacity to do is to ensure in the democracy that I live in, which is the United States, for example, to make the choices and act on those choices so that this does not spread. And I think the public of the United States, when I say 50% of the people are against that system that brings Biden in, that system that criminalizes Trump, that system that I'm not American, but I've never seen an ex-president of a country be treated the way Trump's being treated. And it makes me wonder, okay, maybe he doesn't have all the best ideas in the world, but at the end of the day, it sounds a little fishy to me, So I have to do my math. I have to see what's going on here. Why is this happening in the ways that it is? And so when 50% of the country is asking those questions and not going with the current administration, because that's where it is, right? Biden won by that kind of a margin. Yeah, it's pretty split. So you have 50% of the country who should come together and say, this is not what the United States signed up for, and this is not what our grandparents taught us, and this is not what we grew up learning, and we want our country back. Now, we want our country back is not a matter of we need to kick the Mexicans out. It's not that. It's a matter of the politics need to change. Yes, exactly.
And I'm fine with anybody coming.
You want the spirituality back, right? You want that spirituality that you were raised with, that you remember, or your parents remember even better than you, because they lived in the era where they actually went out there. I mean, the 50s, 60s, 70s, those were eras where there was a lot of political tension in the US, and a lot of people came out and spoke their mind. Today, we've come to a place where we're so separated, and they know that we're so separated, that when one compassivist decides to get up and say something, they shut them down so quick because there is nobody behind them. I normally give the example of, Martin Luther King. Here's a guy who comes up and says, okay, we need some reforms here. I don't like the way my people are living here. We need some change. He makes change. But then in making change, they realize, this is dangerous because he's got a big population supporting him. And now we're going to have to concede a lot more than we're willing. What do? We kill him. Why? I'll tell you why. Because there was no leaders behind him. It was just a one-man show. It was a one-man show. That's all it was. The people behind him all broke up in groups, and then they fizzled. You see, there's no more. Even BLM, after the George Floyd killings and several others that came after, they really didn't make policy change. Name me one law that changed because of BLM's.
Yeah, I mean, probably all what I would consider is more negative laws, but like defunding police officers, like defunding taking.
But defunding police officers is not a matter of racially, helping someone based on their race. If you defund the police, it doesn't mean that even that one police officer that's there is not going to shoot a black person because of race. So it has no, that's what I mean. Right. It has no value in that discussion. And then, there was a lot of money involved in that, and the owners live in Malibu now. So it's great. Good for them. But you see, but that's what it is, right? There is no more than Martin Luther King. So the 50% of the United States right now who think like you, who are like, I'm not sending my kids here. I'm not getting involved in this. I want my values back. I want my spirituality back. I want my God back, right? That's what I grew up with. I want that back. You guys need to come together. That's what Compassivist is about. You guys need to form coalitions. You need to form, and I'm not talking about take your guns and kill people, but I'm spiritually, compassionately together. Your neighbors, all of your community needs to come together and say, we're not allowing this. So, for example, just an example so Americans get this. I mean, if you don't want a Walmart in your neighborhood, you have the power not to have the Walmart in your neighborhood. And if Walmart is stronger and richer and says, no, darn it, I'm buying this piece of land and I'm building my Walmart, don't go in there. How many months do you think Walmart's going to stay open, losing money when nobody in your community goes in there? But you know what the problem is? You guys do the picket fences, you do all of that. When Walmart opens, everybody's in there shopping. Because you know what? Well, they opened, whatever, we might as well. That is where the problem lies. But if you bond together, you make the decisions that you want to make. And that's what the Republic is about.
The Animal Alliance is dedicated to ending the cycle of pet overpopulation and euthanasia. Through our spay and neuter initiatives, we make a difference. You can be part of this life-saving work. Visit theanimalalliance.org to find out how you can get involved and make a difference.
Right. I think that I agree with you. So here's the other side of it from a I consider a realist perspective, may not be that way, but just a factual perspective, that at what point, if you are, let's go back. Yes, everybody could learn how to grow their own groceries and only live on what they're able to create, right? So there's real like human life force behind what you're consuming. We can go back that way to get a society to go back to trade barter type system, live on what you can provide and create, rather than the lifestyle of convenience, because that's ultimately what we trade a lot of this for, is convenience. And we sell our freedoms for convenience. I would say if you don't know that already, that's what you do. So you know that, but we sell our freedoms for convenience. So to get everybody to go back away from convenience, that's a big ask, not just time.
I'm not asking you to do that. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you to do this. Trade your convenience. No, keep your convenience. Trade the markup of your convenience. So right now, you're trading your time, okay, your freedoms to convenience. So you go to Walmart, you buy tomatoes that cost $2. If you were to farm your own tomatoes, it would cost you, say, 50 cents. So you're giving $1.50 up to be able to have the convenience to do something else and not farm your tomatoes and spend your time into whatever other field you're in to earn money to go buy the tomatoes at a more expensive rate. But the catch is here. That works perfectly, and you'll have a lot of innovation and advancement in society. But when somebody comes in and becomes a Rockefeller in society, and everybody else is not a Rockefeller, and says, I can buy all of the industry and I can charge whatever I want because all of your freedoms are tied to one convenience, which is me as a person, that's when they can screw you with the pricing. But now, if it's spread into society where the conveniences are traded fairly, there is no one power that supersedes on society. And that's where democracy screws up. And that's why democracy falls into oligarchies, like you were saying earlier, and mobs and whatnot, because democracy ends up being like this. Elon Musk comes up with an idea of, oh, let's put, electric motors into cars instead of, gas. And he's probably very heavily funded from the same sources you're talking about. Why? Because nobody is going to come and change the entire car industry with one regular car, which only has a difference of the powertrain versus giants of the industry globally. That's not going to happen without those giants being okay on being on board with it as well. Sure. So Tesla happens. When Tesla happens, we went and we gave Elon Musk all the money in the world, right? For that innovation. Okay. Instead of giving Tesla all the money in the world and, then the next businesses as well and promoting that and having one person sit at $300 billion of net worth, what we do is we take that innovation and we say, this is for the good of the society. And we're going to spread this good of the society within a convenience portion that everybody in society can benefit from. Because not a lot of Americans are buying a $70,000 car that looks like a Toyota Corolla, but has a, Tesla engine in it. So right. It doesn't make sense, right? So in that sense, it's not really winning. And the other fact is this whole environmental spiel that it gives is the same car. Put a Tesla in front of a Ford. You'll see the tires are the same. The rims are made of the same stuff. The windows are made of the same glass. The interior is made of the same leather. The suspension's made of the same parts. Nothing's different. You're only going to see one difference. So how much environmental effect does that give? On top of the fact that cobalt is also mined from the ground.
Yeah, I was going to say probably a negative, because to make and destruct
exactly
batteries is actually worse than whatever fuel emissions we're putting.
Thank you. So when you do all the math, it doesn't add up, right? But that's the problem. That's where I tell people, yes, what you were saying is right, but to the point that the freedoms and conveniences are overcharged. So what is bothering the people who are educated and who are getting that educated and who are trying to see beyond the veil is the fact that it's like this. You go to the movies now, what do you pay to go to the movies?
I don't generally go, but if I did, it's probably like $12.50 a ticket, which is...
There you go, $12.50, right? And that's standard. So let's just say in the US, it's between $10 and $15. People know that range. Now, if you go to the theater and you go there and all of a sudden they're like, it's $57 a ticket, what is your reaction? You're like, what is going on, right? Like you start questioning.
That's how I already feel, because
right.
I grew up going for $1 and now I'm like 12.
Yes, I know. And I remember when I got to Toronto, in 1993, there was, $2 Tuesdays and, $2 Canadian dollars Tuesdays. And now you're lucky, to go to the movies for $15. So I understand that. But what I'm trying to say is that's where the catch is. We're not catching on to the fact that for our freedoms that we agreed to trade convenience, we agreed to a certain portion. You look at some of the home prices and, living expenses of the 1960s, and you look at 60 years later, and you're like, how can it be 50 times more when my wage as the same person working on this 60 did not increase by 50 times? So where am I getting screwed here? I'm getting screwed on the trade-off. My freedoms are being taken at the same rate, but my conveniences have been pulled back. Who's benefiting from the pullback? Who's taking the rest? Because this was par.
Right.
I was buying a house for 5 years worth of work. I was buying a car for 6 months worth of work. That was the 1960s. Today, I buy a house. My children are lucky if they finish the mortgage on it, you know? So where did this happen? How did this happen? That's the question. When you realize how this happened, the corruption of the banks, all the sources that you're bringing, you need to act, because we can speak about this for 7 more hours here. It's not going to make a difference. It only makes a difference when somebody gets up and builds Compassivist and tells people join. And tells people to join, because we're not out there to waste our time, picket fences and stop people from going into a school and stuff. I don't agree with any of this. The situation in Israel and Gaza right now, I feel for it.
Sure.
But does it matter if you walk out of your graduation ceremony and wave a Palestinian flag? What is that going to do for the Palestinians? Does it matter if you boycott Starbucks? What is that? Is Starbucks officially licensed to give arms to Israel? Like, where's all this coming from? It's all the games that they throw on us, and we participate. In all of them. We participate in all of them. Right now,
Right.
The Met Gala happened a couple of weeks ago, and there was this whole thing on social media, block celebrities and stuff, because one person said, let them eat cake, and people felt offended. And now everybody's, on that trend and whatever. And I said to myself, what is that going to change in your life? Is that going to make you better somehow? Is that going to advance you? No, it's not. But social media was built by the same people. Why? Now we compartmentalize our events into these little screens, into these little cubes that mean nothing and cannot even hurt anyone. Because when we were out on the street, at least we hurt one person. So there was some fear involved. There was some, rhetoric going on. There was some like, oh my God, these people are going to march again. There was an issue. But now they've taken us digitally, and they're like, you know what, give them that cubicle, let them do whatever they want in there. And every once in a while we'll block them, but let them vent in there. And we sit in our homes, we don't get out of the room, and we vent in there. And we sit there and we design them and we make them beautiful, and we use lovely words and all of that. And all of our friends like it and we feel special. Have we made a change? No. That's where Compassivist comes in. I say, stop that. That's all nonsense. Stop getting engaged in that. Stop buying into it. Stop feeding the system. Get out.
So
find your community.
Yeah, so I appreciate this. So we're gonna let's turn the conversation now into because I think that I really appreciate this conversation. I wasn't sure where this conversation was going to go, but I was excited to have it because I want to know how much we agreed on, how much we don't agree on. Sounds like we actually agree on a lot more than not. So I'm curious. Let's say we all put down our phones. What's an action that you feel like somebody could actually go do to find the people who believe in what they believe in, and to actually help further the conversation, not the conflict? Because I think that that's important. There's a lot of people out there who are just baiting for social media to further the conflict and to get more and more heels dug in on either side. I don't see any value in that. I want to have a conversation. I'm grateful that people come on here and have conversations with me with my perspectives. But what's a way to further that conversation out in the public square? And what's an action that we can take to do that?
We need to learn from the most successful congregation system in the world, the church. So the way the church worked was every place that, the empire expanded into, the missionaries would go. And what would they do there? They would tell people, do you have compassion? Do you feel? Do you want society to be better? Do you have a mission to make the world you live in better? And everybody said, yes, we do. And they said, okay, come over. Let's build this house of God. They built the house of God. They went into the house of God. And what did they do there? Theoretically, they worshiped, they helped each other. People got to know each other in the community. And they talked about the things that they want to do, allocate farming lands, cattle ranching, and, a lot of other things, and moral laws and regulations that guided their little societies. And so this got bigger, and we got into the digital age, which is beautiful. Let's use it. I'm not saying get off your phone. Use it, but use it to advance that project. Don't use it to just sit there and say, Nestle is a bad corporation because it sells bottles of plastic water. We shouldn't be buying more plastic. Okay, that's great. We shouldn't be buying more plastic. If you stop buying plastic, you don't need to post about this because Nestle is going to change its system because Nestle is just a supplier. Nestle is not forcing legally water down our throats by some law.
Bottles, yeah.
Or plastic bottles. So it would change the glass really quickly because Walmart will call Nestle and say, hey, dude, your bottles are not selling. You need to change to something more sustainable because people are buying all the other brands, even when they're more expensive. And they're committing to it. So Nestle's going to say, okay, we're going to change. That's as quick as it's going to happen and as easy it's going to happen. But if we sit there and post about it and still, while we're drinking out of the plastic bottle, that is not going to make a difference. That's just clout. So we need to let go of that. We need to use social media for the ways that we can make the changes. And I always tell people, when you see something catching fire and getting shut down for the wrong reasons that you cannot accept, they're onto something. So when you have these social media platforms and they say democracy for all and freedom of speech, and then somebody comes and speaks and they shut that down, there's two things that is going on. One, that speech was really vulgar and they thought most of society will not want it, so they shut it down, which is a problem on its own, which I'll get there. And the second is something smart was being said there and they don't want society to catch on to that and that catching fire. It's one of those two things. Now, if there's something really awful, let's just say, I don't know, the KKK posted on social media. Okay, that's fine. Let them post. I say freedom of speech. Let them post. They shouldn't get any followers because today nobody should be in the mindset of that. So, let them post, let the fire fizzle out. Nothing's going to happen. There's not going to be problems. But to dictate that shouldn't be posted, where do you stop? Where do you stop dictating this, right? So that's easily settled. The second issue is you get somebody posting, you get the president of the United States posting, and then you shut down his social media accounts because he has a different perspective of what he believes in than you do as the owner of this social media account or as the main influencer of this social media account, then there's a problem in your democracy. The problem in your democracy is you're no longer a democracy.
Right.
So
you're right.
That's what the United States has become. It's lost its republic. It's lost the flair of its democracy. And now I think it's upon the people to come back and make that change. So how do you do it? You go back to forming those groups that the church did, which is why you have religion in that country. When people came into the United States, if they did not bring their religion with them, you would be a secular country in the sense that kind of like Sweden, that doesn't really have, a religion, so to speak, or doesn't have a main religion, so to speak. But religion came on the boat to the United States. For better or worse, and for all the conflicts and issues in the United States and in its histories, today you have religion in people, which may not be following the Pope and the Catholic Church word for word, but at least it ingrained compassion and love in people's hearts. When I go to the South, I've been through all of the United States almost. Right. I've driven through it. I've flown to many destinations. And I feel I have relatives who live in Indiana and Kentucky. And little towns like Somerset, Kentucky. I had family there. And they were teaching at Kentucky University and whatnot. And I'd visited those places. There's so much love in those places, mm-hmm. And there is so much appreciation. There's so much neighborly support. I remember back then, I was younger. People didn't necessarily have to be so careful and locking all the doors and several bolts and all those things. That never happened it didn't. Now it's a different world. Yeah, now you agree it's a different world. So where did this all come from? You look at cities like New York, like these, populous cities that have a lot of different people there from a lot of different places, bringing in a lot of different ideals and sets of thought processes and whatnot, and they clash. And when they clash and when they get marginalized, they commit to certain things that they maybe would have not if they were comfortable. So they commit to crime, for example. They commit to selling drugs. They commit to robbery, whatever it may be. And so this marginalization of society pushes them there. Now, I go to the South and there's this hospitable nature. You go to certain parts of the South and there's this naturally hospitable nature. You go to the North and it feels a little colder. It's like that in Canada too. You're in the city of Toronto. There is no love. There's no hospitality. There's no spirituality. Yeah, it's short. It's short. Love is short in those places. There's a lack of it. There's more of fear. There's more confrontation. There's more standing your ground. There's more, you can't look weak because then they'll take you. whether it's in business or whether it's in an actual fist fight, whatever it may be, it's the same culture. You have to stand, you have to fight all day. You're fighting. You wake up from the morning, you go to work, you're fighting all the way home, even in traffic. Guard your lane, make sure this guy doesn't, cut in front of you, all that. You go to the South and it just gets mellow. It just gets toned down. And in Canada, you go west and that happens. You go to places like Alberta and it's like, whoa, I'm in a different world. Everybody's friendly. You can say I'm in a rush, somebody will let you ahead of them in line. And people respect and believe each other. You can't do that in Toronto. So what's lacking? What's lacking is the bond, is the spiritual bond. We've lost it. We've, again, through the sources that teach us, that educate us, they bring in these, they compartmentalize us. They bring us these differences in ways that they know they can get us to separate from each other. They bring in gender issues that never existed. I mean, I have gay friends, I have straight friends, I have all types of friends. Sure. But why was there no reason for gender in the 60s and everything was fine in the 70s and in the 80s and in the 90s and in 2000s, and all of a sudden today you have to ask a 7-year-old in school what they want to be and then, psychologically adopt them to that level at their decision at 7 years old. It doesn't make sense to me. That's compartmentalizing people, because now some people are like, yeah, we understand this, and they go with the flow, and some people are going against it. So you can't congregate anymore. So they bring a lot of these things. Gender is not the only issue. There's so many different issues that they bring on that every American and their neighbor are now fighting. Each has a different flag on their yard and they're standing guard on it. And, they're not willing to talk to each other anymore. Families are breaking apart. All those things are happening because we as the public are not able to see past those things. We're not able to see these things. We're not able to have those conversations. I'm having this conversation with you, but if I was politically charged, I'd say, no, Sam's the enemy. I can't talk to him.
Right.
Throw my headphones off and walk away from the conversation, right? There goes the podcast. There goes the show. But we have to find common ground. And I think common ground is compassion. You cannot ask any human, do you want hate? And for them, innately to say yes, because that is a disturbed human. And that level of disturbed human is not a natural phenomenon in the world. It's not coast to coast. There are elements and places that there are a few people like that, but that's easy to weed out. But for the general public, you and I, we can agree on compassion. And when we start that agreement on compassion, we say, okay, Ali, you say, okay, Ali, or I say, okay, Sam, where do we go from here? We've created this congregation together. We're sitting here together. We're in a room and we're choosing to use compassion as our first ground. Mm-hmm. Where do we go from here? Well, let's talk. There's this issue, there's that issue, there's that issue, there's that issue. Let's talk. And we break it down. We deconstruct each issue to the reality of it. We don't live in dreams and fantasies and, these academic stories that they sell us from Harvard and other places to, wash our minds. We look at the situation and how it really affects us as humans. How does this affect my house? Mm-hmm. Right?
Exactly.
I take that. And everybody with me, we agree on how that compassion works. And when that compassion affects that, we act upon it, because that is how you make progress. You act upon the compassion that you agree on. So like you said, we're homeschooling our kids. Great. You know what's wrong with that though? The kids may not get the same kind of experiences as going to school. I say that. And you say, okay, Ali, you know what we're going to do? It's not just me. I have 12 neighbors who agree to homeschool our kids. You know what we're going to do? We're going to build our own school system. And now let everybody in the United States who thinks that this model that forced me to homeschool, because I don't have a democracy to voice my opinion, I had to homeschool my kids as a retaliation. Right. Now I can have the democracy to say, you know what? We have our own school system, the SAM school system. I'm going to get that accredited. I'm going to put that in my society, which I know at least there are the 12 homes. We have our teachers who are going to come in. That is compassion building a school. When that school builds, the next one will build. Other communities will learn. They'll say, hey, that SAM school system is amazing. Let's build more of that. The same goes for every practice in your community. You build that. And when you build that and when it grows, you live in the community you want to live by the compassionate values that you want to live by. And you never have to shoot anyone, and you never have to go into conflict, and you never have to have another war. And Texas doesn't need to separate from the United States. None of that needs to happen. They just need to know that the people who actually own the country, because that's your country. It's your country. You keep forgetting that. It's your country. It is not the country of Wall Street. It is not the country of Rockefeller. It is your country. I cannot keep expressing that enough times. So when you remember that it's your country, you go out there and you fight for your country with education and with programming and with the right plans. You get the right lawyers in your teams. You get the people who understand the law, people who understand the education, people who understand different segments. You come together, you form that coalition. That is how every successful corporation happened. And this is the same thing. The church did it the same way. They didn't come in, and the church could not have grown simply by massacring people. There was a period of time, they had to fight to get their position, and they had the Inquisition, and they had other things. They had, the problems in Canada with the residential schools and all of those things. But aside from the way that the force came in, and there wasn't that much retaliation, so they took over. Thereafter, the principle of the church is to bring people together in a compassionate state. Now, some organizations like the Catholic Church, I'm not good with, because I don't think they're doing the right things. I think they're just as bad as the people you mentioned, or worse. But the concept of church is what I'm talking about, not the actual church itself, the owner of the church,
not the organizations
concept. Not the organized religion, but the religion. I believe in Jesus. I believe in Jesus. I try to live my life as much as I can, the way Jesus would have in every instance. And that's one of the things I say. So what would Jesus do? Simple, right? You can't have too many flaws if you live that way. But if you say, what does the Catholic Church say? You're gonna have a lot of flaws in your decision making. And that's where you know what's right and what's wrong. So I really believe in the methodology of forming unions, coming together, strengthening your bonds, and being able to do this more than one person at a time. When you're the one, even when people admire you, when you're the one, like Muhammad Ali, he stood up for himself. He said, look, and he was at his prime. It was kind of like Mike Tyson, going to jail in his prime for rape. This dude didn't even rape. He went to jail for no reason. He went to jail because he said, I'm not down with this. I have an opinion, and I'm free to have an opinion because I'm an American. And they said, no, you're not free to have an opinion because you're an American. This country is not a democracy. That's essentially what they said. And, and they stopped him. So he was one person, couldn't really change that much, as powerful as he was. But if the entire boxing federation of the United States or sports federation of the United States stopped, everybody went on strike. Everyone's like, no more, none of that. No NHL, no NBA, nothing. We're stopping everything. What do you think is going to happen? There's going to be reconsiderations. Now, the problem isn't coming together even, because it's easy today to form these coalitions because people are connected. The problem is they have placed so much hate within us today and so much separation within us that even when we agree on compassion and we come to the table and we come to a round table where we feel equal in our dialogue, we have such difference in opinions from misinformation, from that broad misinformation that you were talking about, that they feed us, that we come in with that and we don't know what we're talking about anymore. And we argue more than we find alignment. So in that case, I tell people, come to the table, leave everything you know behind. Just bring your God with you. Just bring your compassion with you and say, look, guys, we're here to do something good. Let's just a school example. How can we make this homeschooling a better system for our kids so that they can have friends, they can grow, and it can be a more interactive community for them throughout the school day? And you will come up with ideas. But if you come in and say, oh, you know what, we should teach the Mormon system because that's what I was growing up with and that's what I want to impose here. And another person says, no, I'm Presbyterian and that's not going to work for me. That's it. The school's done. It's finished. There's no program. You're just going to go back to homeschooling. But if you come together and say, no, we need to start somewhere where we need to put our differences aside and just basically teach love and teach the educations that are right for our kids to grow and to be able to support themselves and the educations they need. They're teaching kids stuff in school today that's lies. They're teaching stuff to kids today in school that they don't need anymore. You don't need this education. It's archaic. You needed it 150 years ago. Why are you teaching them this today? So you do the right planning, you bring the right education, and you have a system that's going to grow to make your next generation, your children and their children and the other children and all the children who are different are going to be united on one thing. What are they going to be united on? The great land that gives them opportunity and hope and was built with that impression in mind. You know, when you talked about our founding fathers, I know your history. Your founding fathers were not interested in capitalism. They were not interested in the Rockefeller methodology. They were interested in a nation for all Americans. They were interested in a nation for everybody to prosper together, not even alone, not even to prosper, you know, just the word by itself. Like, I'm not building this for Sam to prosper. No, I'm building this for Sam and the entire community to prosper. That was the idea of what came into the United States of America. But then somewhere along the line, the mob took over. And here you are in the mess that you are. And you are facing dire circumstances because, believe me, if this continues, there's going to be separations.
Oh, it's going to be... It'll be interesting in our lifetime, that's for sure, whether it's internal separation or external conflict. But
you need to come together, right? You know this. You see, you're a lot of people I speak to from the US, they know this, but you need to act. Knowing is not enough anymore. And that's what Compassivist is about. It's not about joining my organization and, you know, giving to our charitable causes and things like that. That's one part of it. That's just, you know, the setup of what we do. And the programs that we have that support this kind of narrative of coming together and uniting. But the essence of it is you in your community can have a Compassivist component. And that's why I built this. I built this so that this can happen everywhere in the world, so that the people can get back to their rightful spaces of dignity and honor. You shouldn't feel, you know, wow. So I went to Vegas, and there's this whole underground city in Vegas. It's called the Mole People, right? I don't know how many people know about this in the US, but you guys should go YouTube it because it's crazy. You can be under Caesar's Palace, Bellagio, and all those things, and there's homeless people living just underground above where people are spending tens of thousands of dollars gambling. And that is an American too down there. What kind of a republic was developed to have that? What kind of a republic was developed to have Skid Row in LA? You have some of the wealthiest people in the entire country living in that city, some of the most expensive real estate in the world in that city. Why is it that you have to have Skid Row? Why is it that you have to have all of these problems in some parts of the United States when you have such a city? Because it got hijacked. The country got hijacked.
Yep.
So you need to take it back. That's what Compassivist is about. Taking back what was hijacked, taking back the right.
Yeah, and taking it back through compassionate action and changing the consciousness, not physical force taking back. And I think that's if we end there, that's a good spot to end of all of what we're talking about is a changing of you. It's a changing of how you choose to be and survive and live your life, not a changing of what you're going to force on somebody else, but what you're going to invite somebody into. And I think if we focus on life from that perspective, we'll all be happier. We'll all be able to reach higher goals. And that's, again, all of this is really why I do the Fuel Your Legacy show, because I think the questions that we can ask ourselves, when we start asking different questions, we're going to act differently. And if we start asking questions about the social impact of our choices, then we're going to make different choices, not because we want sometimes the prudent choice is not the choice that we want to make from our conditioning. Our conditioning says, I was talking to my wife about this morning because she was at choir and she had the feeling maybe I should have another kid, and she does not want to have another kid. And she's not, I don't know that she's mentally, it'd be a good decision for her to have more children. Right. So from that perspective, it does not super wise. But then she says, well, why would I even have the thought if I'm not supposed to act on it? Like, well, sometimes sometimes what's prudent and what's a good thing isn't necessarily what we need to do. And sometimes we have thoughts about stuff to help us go through the mental exercise, simply the mental exercise of, well, is that a good thing for me? So that we can make decisions and actually move forward in our life rather than feeling always left up in this unconscious ambiguity, what if we actually started making decisions? And I think a lot of us in society, myself included, I'll put myself there, making final decisions about how you're going to be and who you're going to be, like, is difficult. So making a final decision to definitely have more children or not have more children, that's a hard thing. It's easier if you leave it up to your body clock, or it's easier if you just leave it up to the medical profession saying, yeah, you should or shouldn't, because then you can blame your decision or be in the position of accepting somebody else's decision rather than making a decision. And I think a large part of this compassionate action or compassivist is making a decision off of your own thought process and then deciding. And deciding means you actually go and do the action, right? You cut off all the other solutions or the other options, and you decide to act in one way. And I think that we need more people deciding what they are going to do. And I don't really care what culture you decide to be a part of. Although if you decide to be part of some cultures, I'm going to encourage you to go live among people who agree with that culture. Because if that's different than the culture I want to live part of, I'm going to encourage you to get out of my culture, right? But I don't have a problem with you deciding to be it. If you want to go live in that culture in the Middle East or in Asia or Russia or whatever, you love that culture, go live there. Go commit to it. Don't bring that culture here where we don't want it. We like our culture the way it is. Go be part of somebody else's culture. Or if you decide you want to come be part of our culture, decide to be part of the culture, right? And make a decision. So I think that a lot of it is how are you going to behave? And so I really appreciate this conversation. I've got another, we went way longer than normal. I just looked at the clock. I was like, oh man, we got to go. But I really appreciate this. And I'm excited to see where this movement goes. And I'm more, this conversation's been moving for me, and I'm more committed now to share publicly my opinions of what I do believe than I was before this conversation. And I think that's a change for me, So yes. I appreciate this. If somebody did want to explore more into the world of compassivist. I'm sorry, I see compassion and then that's it. So compassivist, where would they go? Is there an online website? Is there somewhere they can go to just learn more about the idea and how they could?
You can go to compassivist.com, and you can, and our socials are all at Compassivist. That's we're all over, and you can go to compassivist.com, and in Compassivist we have a website that has all our parts in there, so you can find the publishing house and all the other spaces in there, and basically choose where you want to land and choose what you want to read, choose what you want to be involved in, and choose the part of programs that you like. Get in touch with us, and we're open to collaborations, and we're open to helping people form these societies that I'm talking about. And like I said, it's not a one-man show or a one-woman show or anything like that. It's about bringing that collective to power, wherever it may be.
I love it. Okay, well, with that being said, thank you so much, Ali, and we will catch you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy show.
God bless.
Spay and neuter to save lives. This is the mission of the Animal Alliance. Every year, millions of pets are euthanized due to overpopulation. Help us change that. Visit theanimalalliance.org to learn more about our efforts and how you can support us. Together, we can give every pet a chance at life. Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me, and if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.